I stopped a robbery at my part-time job due to the individual's plan of action. Have you ever experienced or witnessed a real-world dumbest criminals moment? I work at my family's liquor store and we have a debit credit machine where we take the card, punch in our store ID cashier ID, then amount, stick the card in and hand it back. This one fellow comes in and grabs a 6-pack from the cooler and comes to the counter. He was the only other person in the store besides a random guy in a corner going through wine. So I rang the 6-pack in when I saw him grab it. He came up to the till and I asked him how he was doing and he said fine, and I told him his total as he was just pulling up to the till, and he mumbled something and reached into his coat and pulled out a gun and placed it on the counter with the barrel, or whatever you call the part that it shoots from, facing me and slides it a few inches forward. Due to being used to people doing that with credit debit cards, I just stretched out and grabbed the gun with one hand and the debit machine in the other. He wasn't holding on to it very firmly, so I just pulled it away, and I realized as soon as I grabbed it that it was a gum, not a credit card, so I froze with his gum in my hand and the debit machine in the other. We looked at each other and then he bolted, leaving the gum behind. I called my uncle and then the cops, who came and took a statement and after told me that the gum was empty, so I wasn't really in any real danger, but it's still one of the funniest things to ever happen to me. Back when I worked at Walmart, one of the best laughs I ever got while working there was watching two middle-aged women run into the store, grab about 50 of those Visa gift cards from the rack, then run out of the store, laughing while they did it. You have to activate them. They are completely worthless without being activated. I bet they were pretty upset when they realized they had just stolen a shitload of nothing. They probably worked for MasterCard. Not really a stupid criminal, more of a gentleman robber actually. I went out at like 2 in the morning to buy cigarettes. Tried a few shops but they were all closed. While walking home in sorrow, I was accosted by a young man with a knife, who asked quite politely for all my money. I was a very poor backpacker at the time and the $50 in my pocket was pretty much the last of my money for the month. I showed the guy my empty wallet hoping he would leave it at that, but he noticed my bus pass and decided to take that instead. He then handed me 2 cigarettes and apologized for the inconvenience and walked away. In a state of semi-shock, I realized that without my bus pass I had no way of getting the 5 AM bus to work. Damn Vancouver Transport Company, and expressed my frustration out loud. The guy came back and asked me what was wrong. After I explained, he handed me back my bus pass and said we've all got to make a living somehow. Edit thanks to Naughty Monkey, TLDR. I got mugged and came out losing nothing and gaining 2 cigarettes. My dad was in a bank and some guy tries to rob the place. Dad notices the guy's gum and tells him to shoot him. The guy wouldn't do it after constant demand by my dad and left the place. He tried to rob the bank with a plastic gun. Easy way to save the day, on ya. Dad. An Aussie guy I know was out drinking in Canada with another Aussie mate. His mate left early to go back to the flat they were sharing in Vancouver and was accosted in a dark alley by 2 men with knives. Being absolutely sloshed off his tits, he failed to pick up on the men's intent or their knives and simply pushed them aside, saying, "Nah, sorry mate, I'm Australian," and continued to duck off home. The poor fellow later realized that he'd just brushed off 2 armed muggers by telling them he was Australian and ignoring them. Some creepy looking guy tried to carjack me. I was leaving the supermarket at 8 in the morning on my way through Rotorua to go to Wellington. He knocks on my window and I roll it down about an inch. He asks if I can give him a ride to some gas station. I'm not too familiar with the place, so I ask where it is and he points up the road. Then he tells me I can just drop him at the corner of the street about 100 meters away. I laughed and told him to walk. Then he tried to force his way into my car, a 1973 Mercedes, so I opened the door as hard as I could into him and slammed it shut on his fingers. Those doors weighed like 80 kilos. I know this because I had to take them off to fix some rust around the hinges. I feel bad for possibly breaking his fingers. Edit, for all those asking if he was black. He was some white junky looking fellow. There were 2 guys from my high school that robbed a little convenience store. They had ski masks and guns and the robbery went pretty smoothly for them. But they also decided to wear their Letterman coats with their names on the back. They were later arrested. The twist? The robbery was actually committed by a couple different kids from the school who had a grudge against those two. Stole their jackets. Robbed the store. Then returned the jackets, possibly with the stolen money still in them. Not actually dumb criminals, but a brilliant frame job. I worked at a bowling alley in high school. We had a guy climb up into the ceiling in the restroom and wait until we closed, so he could climb down and rob it. Not only did he not get any money, everything was locked up in a gigantic safe from the 1930s that probably weighed over 1,000 pounds. But he couldn't even get out of the building. All the steel fire doors were padlocked on the outside. And I guess he didn't want to risk being seen smashing the glass on the front doors, since it was right by a busy road. He did the only logical thing, which was go back to the bar and drink all night. The manager found him passed out on the floor when he opened up in the morning. This is strangely similar to a story I wasn't going to post, because it was very successful. Also at a bowling alley where I used to work. Guy hides in the ceiling of the bathroom, we think. Still hasn't been caught. Comes down after we close. Deactivates alarm. Smashes it. Breaks down a fire exit. Lets in his buddies, we presume. Based on what happens next, and then they leave with the entire safe, which was also very old like the one in your story and weighed at least 1/4 ton, and all the CCTV footage. Unfortunately there was only about 30 pounds in the safe. Mine is really similar to Arp's. Over the last 2 years I worked at a Jimmy John's. And one day we got robbed. He waited for all the customers stop pouring in. And go to the bathroom for about 15 minutes. Was he about to pee himself from excitement? Did he get a sudden case of the sheets? I don't know, but a co-worker walked by during this time and heard him loudly talking to himself. Which I guess was to get pumped up. Then he finally walks out to a completely empty JJ's. And orders a sandwich. He was clearly nervous and something was up. As soon as the register was open he goes, "I have a knife. Give me all your ducking money." The girl on the register was a super nice girl, so she totally blanked. However, our GM at the time, a fat Mexican guy in his mid-20s who grew up in a bad neighborhood, just nonchalantly goes, "I don't believe you, show me your knife." The robber starts bickering with our GM, but the GM stays calm and tells him to show it. So he finally takes his knife out and waves it at us saying he'll ducking stab us if we don't give him the money. Now here's the best part. We all work with knives and they're really ducking sharp, but our Mexican, it's an affectionate term, takes this as a challenge and grabs our knife and starts chasing him out the store and down the street. The best part is he's so short and fat. He's waddling in an apron as he's running yelling, "Pussy. Fight me like a man, Giotto." When the police came the guy was gone, but to this day our GM tells that story to every new person we hire. OHH, and to those of you who don't believe me, here's the proof. Store was in Carroll Stream. GM's name was Sebastian. A few weeks ago I'm getting home from late night classes when this guy jumps out and says, "Jimmy, all your money," or something like that. Problem is, he has no weapon, no gun, no knife. He wasn't even a threatening looking dude. I just sorta walked past him back to my dorm. Guy keeps at it till we get near my dorm. He gets in front of the door and demands money. I pick up a rusted pipe that was always near the door and he backs off. Laziest criminal ever. Dude comes into my store, purchases an item with $100 bill. I give him his change. He says that's not enough change and reaches across the counter into the register drawer to try to grab back the 100 he gave me. So I slam the drawer on his fingers. The end. Someone stole my laptop and decided it would be smart to use it and post pics, the story of how he did it. No cops involved because I beat him until I got it back. A couple of people broke into my storage facility once. They cut through the fence and was going through units when they realized there was a camera mounted near them, pointed right where they were standing. They panic, cover their faces up, and then decide to get rid of the camera. They climb up on something and start trying to tear the camera down. While doing this, there is nothing covering their faces anymore and they are literally staring into the lens of the camera no more than 3 feet away. Idiots similar to yours went through a storage facility we use. They cut the lock off our unit and several others in the same line, but didn't take anything. They only took some firearms stored in one unit. So, they got caught because they were the only ones who knew the firearms were stored there besides the renter. A friend of my cousin went to a Circle K in a small town and went to buy alcohol. He went to the counter. They asked for ID so he could purchase. Obviously. He showed them and then put them at gunpoint and said he was robbing them. Stupidest kid ever. And he was mega caught. I believe he's still in jail on several charges. I work in a car audio store. Gangbanger wannabe shows up wanting us to install his amplifier right now. All my installers are busy and tell him ain't going to happen today. But tomorrow we can. He gets all upset and tells me his boy will install it himself, all he needs is the wires. I show him our amp kits and he picks one out and pays with a credit card and shows me his ID, which is good. So the next thing I see is this fool grabbing a box with some entry level 12 inches woofers and running out the door and throwing the box into his ride and peeling out of our parking lot. The store was pretty crowded and more than a few customers saw what just went down and asked should they chase this guy down. I couldn't believe that this idiot just paid with a credit card and I checked his name and ID and it matched, so I had all the information I needed to have him arrested. But I said oh hell no, I just wrote up a ticket and manually punched in the credit card for 3x the amount, something like $585.99 instead of $169.96. The charge got approved and was never contested either. I hope he enjoys his speakers. Not mine, but rather my sister's co-worker. Pardon the third-hand information. My sister used to work at a bank in a Walmart. And her co-worker had this somewhat older pickup truck, about 15 years old at the time of this story. The truck was pretty unremarkable in every way: stock parts, stock stereo, average looking. Some idiot punched out the driver's side window and stole the CD player, which didn't play past track 7 on any given CD, mind you. It was stock and also 15 years old. Instead of disconnecting the plugs like a normal thief, he cut all the wires, making it a stolen CD player that now required repair. The idiot bled all over the inside of the truck because he punched the window in, and proceeded to wrap his hand up in one of the girl's spare work shirt. After taking the CD player, he then walks into Walmart and tries to steal a TV. Not one of the newer TVs that only weighs like 25 pounds, the big tube TVs that weighs like 80. When he walked out, the alarm went off. He told the person at the door that it was a return, and he was simply taking his old one back to his car. Keep in mind that he still had a bloody bank teller's polo wrapped around his hand that had an employee's name on it. An employee who was working at that store at that moment. Of course the friend in the store pressed charges. The friend was also offered an appearance on one of those judge TV shows, but declined because the case was too stupid for a daytime judge show. Edit, minor grammar. I didn't actually witness this, but I did witness the effects. One afternoon while trying to cook dinner, the power started acting funny. It wasn't a blackout, but more of a brownout, where power dimmed and came back on, flickered, went out, came back on, dimmed, up and down for several minutes. Then eventually the power went out. It would come back on for a few minutes now and then, but it was more or less out for another hour or two. I found out a couple days later that some idiot tried to steal copper wire from some power station. The flickering of lights and such was him being cooked by several thousand volts. Idiot got held trying to steal $100 worth of copper wire. Working as a cashier for a grocery store, a customer came and placed a random assortment of things up at my register. Candy, soda, a couple kids' toys and a pre-cooked chicken from the deli. She mentioned to me that she was from Oregon and would like the tax removed. We can do that in WA for customers from specific states. To do this, She had to give me her ID so I could record the info on it before removing the tax from the transaction. After giving her her total, she said she would like to pay with a check. She is filling it out as I noticed it was pre-signed. I asked her whose they were and if they were available to come sign the check in front of me. She said they belonged to her mom who was in the car. When she left, I saw her get in the passenger seat of a van and leave. So I took down the license plate as they drove off. After this all happened, I called my floor manager over and told him what happened. We both shrug and basically say weird, leaving it at that. Later that day, the loss prevention guy calls me upstairs, which is never normally a good thing. He tells me that I had made a good catch, because 2 women had been going around town with a stolen book of checks and I was the reason the cops had an ID and a license plate to go after. TL. Dr. LAD gave me her ID to prove she deserved a $0.78 discount on goods she intended to pay for with stolen checks. I was summoned to court to tell this story to a judge. This just happened in my town. A man took a car allegedly, since he hasn't been convicted, from an auto repair place after bashing apart the after hours key box. When police later found the car, they didn't have far to look. Inside the car was a McDonald's receipt and a receipt for the liquor store. Police simply went to both stores and got the video footage of the man going through the drive-thru and stopping at the liquor store in the stolen car. They needn't have bothered. Also inside the car was paperwork from the town's jail with the man's name on it. In college, I worked as a loss prevention guy for one of the big boxes. You know, sit in a little room and watch cameras to catch shoplifters. We were having a problem with customers' wallets being stolen out of the men's fitting rooms. The victim would go in, try on a new pair of pants, come out to show his wife, and when he went back into the fitting room his wallet would be gone. So one afternoon I get a call from the sales staff about a fight in the men's fitting room. I run down there to find a 6 feet 2 inches black guy with a 5 feet 2 inches white guy in a headlock. The black guy caught the white guy coming out of his room with his wallet. Turns out the black guy's wallet was his Secret Service badge and credentials. Whoops. I mean, it's not as dramatic as a robbery, but it was pretty damn stupid. I live in a town with the biggest asshole of a cop on the planet. The guy who gives you a ticket for jaywalking, tickets for rolling stops, etc. I was at a house party in high school, and this one kid was playing Edward 40 hands, so he had 2 bottles duct taped to his hands. This jerk of a cop showed up to bust the party, and all the kids scattered like ants. However, genius boy, instead of following everyone else around the back of the house and into the woods, decides to try to vault the fence into the neighbor's backyard. Because he had 2 bottles strapped to his hands, the only way he could accomplish this was by smashing the bottles on a large rock, grabbing the fence, and lifting himself over. He absolutely tore up his hands. I'm talking blood everywhere and skin missing. It was disgusting. Everyone saw him do it, but I guess the cop couldn't quite tell who it was in the dark. Anyway, Mr. Officer just goes to the nearest hospital and waits for a drunk kid with insane glass lacerations and bloody duct tape all over his hands to show up. Immediately arrested for drinking underage and fleeing the police. TL. DR dumb teenagers. I once foiled a clever plan by an elderly man at the department store I used to work at. He had a blazer with countless hidden pockets and he was filling them with bottles of oil of Olay moisturizer. The loss prevention guy called me to help corner him. As he was leaving the door, he saw that I was looking at him and started to run. We ran after him and he looked back at us. That's where he ducked up. He tripped over his own feet and fell like a sack of potatoes. Most of the moisturizer bottles exploded and he was lubed neck to knee. He smelled fantastic though. Edit, grammar, spelling. Very similar story I posted yesterday on another thread. Worked at a video store for quite a while in my late teens early 20s. One day a guy, who looked to be about 18 or 19, walked up to the register. Sheepishly pulled out a folding pocket knife and told me to give him all my money. The counter I worked behind was elevated by about 2 feet and only had one entrance, which this guy was nowhere near. So there was zero chance of him even being able to touch me. For some reason, this guy just really pissed me off. I said no. He said what? And I said no again. He then said, I don't want to do it, but I will cut you, man. I then began to yell, if you cut me you better cut me ducking good, because if I get one hand on you I will ducking end you. I will ducking rip your goddamn head off. As I am screaming this at him, I am climbing over the counter towards him and he is starting to retreat towards the exit quickly. He made it out before I reached him. So I opened the door after he left and yelled something like, you better keep running. If I ever see you again you are ducking dead. I have never been afraid of a fight, but if this guy had a gun or serious blade this would have never happened. I was just so pissed off at the idea of him trying to rob me with a 3-inch folding pocket knife that probably couldn't cut butter. God, that story still pisses me off. I work part-time in a grocery store that is robbed all the goddamn time. Like seriously. Once or twice every month. It's gotten to the point where I now just laugh every time I arrive at work to see the store has been broken into again. One particular night just before we were beginning to close, a brazen rob runs into the store who appears to be no older than 20 with a cricket bat and nervously demanded the money from the register. At this point the customers at the front end are backing away and the man attempts to make an escape. As he breaks for the door, while I'm standing in an adjacent aisle where the soup pleasantly happened to be shelved, I grab a big ol' can of tomato soup and give it a friendly toss in the vicinity of his face. KO. Slam dunk. Hole in one. He takes a comical fall into the flour display in a glorious explosion of flowers and water. Then every male customer jumps on the bastard and pins him down until the police arrive. TLDR. Threw a can of soup at a robber and became a superhero.